All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming today, and thank you for inviting us to come and speak to you guys about Solar Urbana-Champaign 2.0, the group buy program for Champaign County. And my name's Andy Robinson, and I work with Campus Building Energy Efficiency, but I'm working my night job is to help talk about this solar program with Midwest Renewable Energy, MREA. And Nick Gordon is here from New Prairie Construction, and Kalin is here from New Prairie, and we have the president of New Prairie here as well. So thank you very much for coming today, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'll start, the first half of this talk will be the educational component, and I will give the sort of educational background, solar details, info about the program in general, and then Nick will take the second half and go into details and example installations and talk about some of the pricing and some of the opportunities in town. So why are we here? We want to lead in creating a more sustainable community by making solar simple. We want to make solar the norm. We want to make it the standard thing that goes on rooftops. We want to make it, anytime you see a sunny roof, that solar is just the obvious thing to be on top of that roof. We want to take all of the mysticism out of it, take all of the confusion out of it, and solar's come down in price, that we want to just get it everywhere, get it totally normalized throughout the city and throughout the county and throughout helping our community. Put with this educational components put on by the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, and the city of Urbana helped to start up this group buy with a request for proposals, and then New Prairie Construction is our installer that's been selected through this process. Just a little background. So I'm Andy Robinson. I work with Building Energy Efficiency. My church over in Green Street in Urbana, the Unitarian Church, we just, the last 6 months, we've been working on putting solar on the roof there. That middle picture is so we put a new white roof on. These are cinder blocks that are holding down these feet that the panels are going to install on. And then here's a panoramic view of all 81 panels in our system there. And so we're pretty excited to have that on. It's been online for about 3 weeks now, and we've been producing energy. I would call up the real-time graph, but we're getting the wireless is being updated in the church right now, and actually I tried that and the online portal's not working.
Can you say what LEED stands for?
LEED. So my background, leadership in environmental and energy design. And so that's a background. So that's a series of courses and a test in green building design, and with a focus on, I focus on the energy side of it personally. I'm an engineer, and I like to focus on the energy aspect of energy in buildings. It also talks about recycling content in buildings. It talks about landscaping. It talks about water use. So really a holistic green design process. And I'm here with MREA helping to do the presentation. And okay, what is a group buy? So this group buy program is lower prices through, number one, competitive contractor selection. So the city of Urbana helped to run a request for proposal with the Midwest Renewable Energy Association. And this is our second year. Last year we did a very similar program. And so we have, basically this gets us the best contractor with the best price, with the best reputation, and the best reliability. So we feel very strongly about this process for this group buy and this group aggregation. There's number two, there's community-led outreach. So these kinds of sessions, we're doing the educational component, the educational outreach in groups like this, instead of just being one-on-one, instead of New Prairie having to educate every person that might be interested in solar, instead of you personally spending weeks on websites reading about solar or reading about installations, we wanted to get everybody together and get all the information out in one fell swoop. So we're having 20 of these sessions throughout the county over the next 6 months here. It's a limited time offering, so we have this 6-month window between, this is about our 4th session, so it started a few weeks ago, going through August 31st. We want to get everybody to sign into this group buy program by August 31st. And the analogy I like to use is, what if your teacher assigned homework and you never had a due date? You would never do it. So how many people do you know that have been interested in solar for years and years and years and years and have never pulled the trigger on it? So we want to put light a little fire under everybody that's interested and say this is the time to do it. We have these overlapping incentives that we're going to talk about today. The finances make sense. The technology is making sense. The warranties are there. These systems are excellent long-term investments, and those are some of the things we're going to discuss today. Limited time offering, so we talked about limited time offering through August 31st, and then the installs will happen by December 31st, and that has to do with the federal tax credits as well, so getting them in within this tax year is a good idea. Strong customer education, we touched on that a little bit. And then number 5, economies of scale. So this group buy program allows our contractor to buy pallets worth of solar at a time. I mean, trucks worth of solar at a time, really. So it really allows this economy of scale on the purchasing of the equipment. It allows for streamlining the install of the equipment. Once we get people from these sessions interested and get them site assessments, they can just line these installs up and keep their crews busy for this period of time. And it's a really good thing for the installer for lowering those soft costs, those installed costs as well of these systems. So not only just the material cost with a bulk purchase, but then the installed costs as well. And we'll go into some of the ways that as we get more installs through this program, we reach tiers of cost savings as well and rebates as well. So everybody wins. The county wins. We reduce our carbon footprint as a community. We reduce our pollution, and we increase our energy independence. Brief background about who is the MREA. Founded in 1990 in Wisconsin with the first energy fair in Wisconsin. And we like to talk about that energy fair as a yearly energy fair on the third Saturday in June.
Yeah, it's almost around the solstice, essentially.
Usually around the solstice.
Most energy then.
The most energy around the summer solstice. And it's basically, we like to describe it as NASA meets Woodstock. So it's a bunch of nerdy engineers and enthusiasts, energy enthusiasts getting together for a weekend. The speaker is one of the co-founders of Tesla is going to be the keynote speaker this year. Nick is going to be there helping to volunteer and getting free admission to the energy fair. And if anybody that was interested, our program is aligned with this energy fair. So Midwest Renewable Energy Association is a regional association promoting solar, promoting wind, promoting energy efficiency throughout the region. And the city of Urbana helped to start this request for proposal this year and last year. And one of the disclaimers there is just that, so as we discuss financial information today and tax information today, the disclaimer is just that I'm not your legal and financial advisor. If you have decisions to make on those lines, talk to your legal financial advisors. Likewise, the city of Urbana doesn't take any liability in the system that you decide to install with a private contractor. So really think of this as informational. We like to think of it as very correct, strong information, but there are just those 2 disclaimers there. Okay, New Prairie Construction. So New Prairie's been around in Urbana since 1988. And the really high quality renovations, new construction projects. We're going to be having a tour. One of the solar power hours is going to be at their office, which is a straw bale house on Urbana in a couple of weeks here coming up. Another installation that you see on the screen is this solar pergola that's going to be May 5th or so, May 6th. We're going to have an open house at this installation. So Nick helped build this and helped assemble this and put all the solar on. And this is actually a pretty cool installation. These solar panels are a little bit fancier than your average one. These have transparent backs on them, so you can see the lattice, you can see the dappling of sunlight that's coming through these. And these are pretty cool. In fact, these even get a little bit of a boost because they get some backscatter solar.
They get a very significant boost from.
They get a boost from the back.
Separate contact on the back side.
So these are bi-layer. These are layer on the front and layer on the back. So it's a little bit more advanced than most of the systems we're going to talk about today. But this is, these are the kinds of cool installations that are this adds value to the house beyond just the energy that it's producing. This is adding aesthetic, and this is a beautiful place to sit on a summer afternoon. So I welcome everybody to come to our solar open house that we're going to have in a couple weeks. It's in Champaign, over back behind Westview in that sort of neighborhood. But about New Prairie, so they've been around. really rock solid partners to be in this program. They were the subcontractor last year, and they're the prime contractor this year. They did a lot of installs in Champaign-Urbana, quite a lot of the assessments, and they have national certification in solar. They have certification from the Building Performance Institute in energy efficiency. They're members with the MREA and the Illinois Solar Energy Association. They're also members with the Window Preservation Alliance, so if anybody has older windows that don't work anymore, and instead of just trashing them, you might want to rehab your windows, these guys are the ones to talk to in town for preservation projects, in addition to brand new windows, if you want to go that way as well. But, and Nick will do a little bit more description of New Prairie as he comes in a little later in the program. So this program, this Champaign-Urbana program, is outreach countywide. It's open to residences and businesses. So as you guys are sitting here thinking, if you are thinking to yourself, well, I don't own a home, you can think about, well, do I rent a home, and who owns that rental? That's one question right there. Who could I talk to? My landlord. What businesses do I go to? What strong local businesses do I go to? We're going to talk about a couple of the business case a little later on, and the financials for businesses are even better, and the payback for businesses are really short because of the accelerated depreciation that businesses can take advantage of. So there's really a strong business case, the financial case for businesses. You can also think about some of the organizations in town that you work with, or that you're on the boards with, or that that you can share this information with. So we want everybody to share with friends and family and colleagues, and please talk about these programs with your friends and family. And keep your eyes open for sunny roofs as you're driving and biking around. We've had success in other cities. Last year we had our solar in Champaign-Urbana, but then Solar Bloomington Normal took off right after ours last year. There's been some in programs in Milwaukee, Portland. Last year we had 81 installs in Champaign County, and that was 605 kilowatts of solar that was installed. And we like to say that we beat Chicago, only had 601 kilowatts of solar with their group buy program last year. So we beat Chicago by 4 kilowatts, which was pretty cool. But this program pricing includes the permitting, the installation, all the components, warranties on these panels. The panels are warranted for 25 years of production, and the inverters are warranted for, I think, 10 years or so, or
Base warranty for 12.
base for 12.
It's pretty cheap to extend it.
And extended warranties are pretty straightforward as well on those kinds of things, because these systems really do have a good robustness. They have long warranties because they last a long time. Not a lot of no moving parts, pretty simple electronics, pretty straightforward.
Can I ask what happens when a panel gets old? Is disposal a problem, or after 20 years?
So these panels, they're made of glass on the front. They have silicon on the inside. They have some silver and some aluminum, and they have maybe an aluminum frame. So pretty recyclable products in general. In 25 years, so one of the questions is, what do you do with this panel in 25 years? Well, it's warranted to produce 80% of its production at 25 years. So it's still going to be cranking away just fine. And maybe if you really wanted to get more production out of your roof, you might take it off and put it, I don't know, on your garage, or maybe there'll be a market for somebody a farmer to pick these up lower cost. Right. Presumably they'll still be working just fine. We have installations from the 70s that are working just fine. Usually it's the wiring and the interconnections that are, eventually after a long time, just want to make sure that they are well covered and well sealed, and maybe in 25 years or 30 years, maybe the wiring has to be adjusted or fixed up a little bit.
Yeah, Sharp, one of the oldest solar module manufacturers, did some testing a couple of years back of some 25 years. So they were past their warranty, and at their warranty they're supposed to be producing 80%, but they were still producing 94% on average. So they're very robust. They make sure that they'll be able to meet that warranty by a wide margin.
Yeah. So we expect that these systems will continue to work, and we'll talk about roofing in a couple of minutes, because you might have to take them off to re-roof. But then the idea is maybe you could just put them right back on in 25 years, and that would be completely reasonable. All right, let's talk about a little bit about the group buy and the pricing of this program. So this is the best installer for the best price, selected by the Community Advisory Committee. We had a list of criteria, including price per watt, professional certifications, history and quality of work, energy efficiency abilities. But this program, so we have this $2.99 a watt is our base price. And to give you an example, that used to be when I came back to Champaign. I'm from town. I came back. I went to the Solar Decathlon in Washington D.C. and saw the team there in 2007. The price for solar was about $12 a watt then. It came down to $10 a watt. It was $8 a watt 10 years ago. So this price really has come down a lot. And this is the module, the modules and the panels and the inverters and all the racking and all the installations. So there's multiple things that are made up in this $2.99 a watt. So $3 a watt, let's say. Now we get to these tiers, these 3 different tiers in this program, and the price goes down per watt. So when we get to 50 kilowatts installed, and that's about 7 or 10 homes, we're going to have a price reduction of 3 cents per watt. When we get to 21 homes, it'll be another 3 cents to 6 cents a watt, and then we'll get to 9 cents a watt total at 35 homes. So that's a rebate check that'll come back. So even if you've installed early in the system, in the program, then you'll just get a rebate check at the end of the program with however many homes we had. And last year we had, I said 605 kilowatts installed. So this is so we well surpassed our top tier last year, and everybody got a rebate check in the program. So that could be in the order of, I think our example has an order of about a $700 rebate check. All right, here's a typical installation. Nick's going to go into the details of all the installations, but I just wanted to whet your appetite a little bit here at the beginning. So this typical home, this is a home from last year. They covered pretty much the entire roof, and it's 7.8 kilowatts. That's about 100,000 or 10,000 kilowatt hours a year. It's about its total energy use, maybe 90% or about 100% of this home's electric use. You want to design your system to not be over 100% of electric use, because you don't want to give back free electricity throughout the year. But we'll go into some of that detail in a second. But basically, so at $3 a watt installed costs $23,000, so that you need that money up front. But then when you get your taxes back at the end of the year, there's a $7,000 30% federal tax rebate. We'll go into more detail on that in a bit. There's the solar renewable energy credit payment of about $6,600. Those are over 5 years, paid quarterly. We'll go into more detail on how that auction program works. And then, so the net cost in the system goes down to $9,600. And then you might get somewhere in the range of $700 back rebate. So we're in the range of $9,000. And I replaced a HVAC system in my house last year. And the quotes for my HVAC system were $8,000, $10,000, and $12,000 for 3 different efficiencies for my heating and air conditioning. So it's interesting to think about it sort of on the order of things that people are doing for their homes anyways, once you include these overlapping incentives. And these overlapping incentives are something that we didn't think either of these were going to be renewed last year. The federal tax credit was expiring last year, and very nicely the federal Congress did renew that tax credit. The Illinois credits, who knows what's going on with the state budget in Illinois. Luckily, these are not state funds. These come from an auction, but still, who knew what was going to happen if they were going to run an auction again this year. So we're very excited that they're running a spring auction that coincides with this program. So we jumped on this program again this year to take advantage of these 2 credits again. But basically, over 25 years, you can think of this system as saving $51,000 in electrical costs, which is pretty amazing to think about. That this $9,000 investment saves $50,000 over its warranted life. Simple payback is 7.2 years, so the money that you put in, this $9,000 net cost, and the yearly savings that you get in 7 years, you've made your yearly savings back. So that's something that people usually think of when they're thinking about how long does this make financial sense? Is this going to pay for itself over the life of the system? The other thing, you can think about the green benefits. So this is the same as planting 177 trees per year. And just try to imagine how much effort it takes to plant 177 trees in a year. So I've got this illustration of this Christmas tree farm here. But these trees aren't going to get cut down. These are trees that are going to be planted, staying in the ground for the life of the system. This system is reducing carbon that would go into the atmosphere just the same way these trees would be reducing carbon. So it's kind of amazing to think about. Or if you like to think about not driving 57,000 miles per year, that's a big number as well. So these are the savings that this kind of solar system can get you for the green benefits. Some people like to think about water. There's the water energy nexus. So some people like to think about how many gallons of water this saves by not going up a smokestack in steam for cooling for a power plant, or by not having to wash coal and the contamination that happens to the water in that process. So there's certainly lots of benefits to these type of systems. Solar basics. Yep.
Add value to the home?
Yeah, and I have a slide in a second about adding value to the homes. So just really briefly, we'll go through the solar basics and not take too much time on these. But basically, a new solar system is installed in the US every 2.5 minutes. It's a really common thing on the east and west coasts where electricity is 2 times more expensive than it is here. We pay about 10 cents a kilowatt hour here. In Connecticut, I was paying 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And in Hawaii, they pay 35 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's why you see solar going into those places first, because they pay so much for electricity. And it takes a little longer in the Midwest where we just have really cheap electricity. And we have cheap electricity because it's really dirty electricity. We're burning the dirty coal, and we have quite a lot of production potential. We have a lot of nuclear power plants as well. So basically over 42 gigawatts of solar installed in the US. That's 8.3 million homes. It's just some big numbers to think about. And solar is the #1 increasing, the newest, the largest increasing electricity generating capacity in the United States. So you don't see people putting in new coal plants. You don't see people putting in new nuclear plants. You see people putting in new natural gas plants, and you see people putting in wind and solar. But solar is being put in at the largest rate, the highest increase of any of these systems. All right, home values, since we had the question about that. Solar homes, in these 2 studies, one by the National Renewable Energy Lab and one by Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, solar homes sold 20% faster and 17% more than equivalent non-solar homes. And then the second study across 6 states, Lawrence Berkeley found that home buyers will pay a premium for homes. And I like to think about our community here in Champaign-Urbana as being the kind of community that values solar as well. Certainly our program far exceeded our expectations last year. People really thought that was exciting. People get really excited about it. At my church, we were putting on a new roof, and I talked about how these solar incentives were available as well. A little different for when you're not for profit and you don't pay taxes. We had to structure it differently. But people just got really excited to donate money to this project. So a lot of people live in Urbana with shady trees over their houses, and they couldn't do solar personally, and they said, hey, I would love to put in, we called it, the total cost for us was about $750 per panel, and we just made a big board with lots of stickers on it for all of our 80 panels, and we said, hey, can you buy a panel? And can you buy a third of a panel? And some people bought 2 panels. So everybody liked this idea of ownership and buying in. And likewise, when you sell your house, I think that's, we talk about doing aesthetically pleasing installations on the roof, and you can work with Nick on how it's going to look and make sure it looks balanced in your opinion. And I think it looks nice, and the neighbors generally get excited about it, and resale values we think are still there as well. So these are good long-term systems that'll stay with your house and be a long-term investment. Just really briefly, we'll go into the brief gist of how solar works. So we've got photons coming down from the sun, striking the silicon, and generating electrons. Now these are direct current electrons that go to the inverter. The inverter converts them to alternating current, and then maybe your house has all of its lights on and all of its air conditioning on a hot summer day. You'd be using that electricity first. But let's say you aren't home and you have your house on a setback thermostat. In that case, you aren't really using much electricity at home when your sun is shining on your roof. So in that case, you would be feeding back through the meter to the local grid, and you're feeding back into the community. So your neighbors are taking advantage of your electricity that you're feeding back. The market down the street, the bank down the street would be taking advantage. So the community is using those electrons when the sun is shining, and you're reducing, for our community, you're reducing the coal plant that's having to chug away, or the natural gas plant that's having to turn on the hottest day of the year. And by the way, some of those natural gas plants that turn on the hottest day, there might only be 10 instances a year when they turn on. So we build natural gas plants to turn on for 10 times a year to meet that load on those hottest days. So solar really coincides nicely in that regard. So that's another added benefit, that it's offsetting the dirtiest power on the grid. So basically that meter just runs backwards. It's called net metering. Net metering is set up in Illinois law, and I think I have a slide on net metering in a second. But basically when my parents put in solar about 10 years ago in Long Island, The day they turned it on, they had the old-fashioned analog meter still with a rotating dial on it, and you'd see the sun started to rise, and the meter started to slow down, and as the sun got higher in the sky, it started rotating backwards, slowly rotating backwards, and then you'd go inside, you'd turn the toaster on, it would start spinning pretty quickly, and then after 30 seconds, the toaster would turn off, and it would go to spinning backwards again, and then a cloud would come over, and it would kind of stall, and then it would kind of, it was just amazing to watch. I really liked that visual, and I would challenge MSTE, I think even at our church and at schools in town, I think we really need to get back to some sort of analog display of how this works too. I've got a really cool digital display, but I think that physical representation is really key, and that was a really neat thing to see. We talked about the inverter just a little bit. It's the heart of the solar system. This is the inverter that's in the basement of New Prairie Construction, and this is in their office. It plugs into the circuit breaker, and so basically the wiring is not terribly complicated. It's as if you have a dishwasher, but your dishwasher is generating electricity. So just imagine it as another appliance. It just goes on a breaker circuit as its own appliance, and it's just appliance that's feeding backwards into the grid. And the online display is pretty cool. You can see each panel individually. You can see weeks at a time and how much solar, cloudy days versus sunny days. So these inverters that have been selected for this project have this online reporting built into them. They're pretty advanced inverters, and they're pretty cool in that regard. Just a little background on inverters. The older type of inverters are string inverters, and if you think about this almost like an old set of Christmas tree lights, when one light goes down in your string, the whole string goes down. So all your lights would go out. In this case, if one panel gets shaded by, let's say, your chimney or by a tree branch, that whole string gets brought down by that shaded panel in a string inverter. So string inverters are less expensive, they're older technology, they're cheaper, but they have this drawback with partial shading. So to match that, some of the work that was done at University of Illinois helped to invent microinverters. So microinverters are basically repeated inverters for each panel. Each panel gets its own inverter. Each panel is producing power to the grid, to the house, and they're more expensive. So you have to repeat that inverter electronics for every panel. These are really the most expensive types of systems that you might see out there, and but they have the advantage of when shaded, they don't take the whole string down. All right, so for this, what a lot of the industry is going towards is a hybrid of the two. So we have an inverter still, but we have these power optimizers. Each panel has its own power optimizer on it. It's less electronics than having an inverter on every panel, but but it also takes advantage of if one panel gets shaded, it doesn't bring the whole array down. So this is a nice hybrid of the two. It's less expensive than the dedicated microinverters, but it has all of the benefits of that system as well. And these are the type of systems that have been selected, that New Prairie has selected for this install of this program. All right, typically we're talking about roof-mounted solar options. That's the most common. You just lay them flat on the roof. They go on little rails, and they get screwed down into the rafters in your roof, and it's a nice tight seal. So no leaks, no problems there. But you want to have a nice sunny roof. Generally, you want to have a south-facing roof, but east and west-facing can also do. There's about a 20% reduction on east and west-facing roofs. Snow, just brief note, is that we get snow in Illinois, so there are going to be some days in the winter when you're not producing electricity, but you're still tied to the grid. So these grid-tied systems, it's not an issue. Wind loading and roof conditions, so that you want to make sure that your roof has enough, can hold the weight of the panels. And they weigh about as much as, if you imagine they're about 3 by 5 feet. If you imagine picking up a mirror from your house, it's pretty similar construction. You have a frame, you have a piece of tempered glass on the front, and you have maybe an aluminum or silver backing on that. So it's basically like picking up a mirror. So it's kind of heavy. There's some weight to it, but it's doable, and roofs usually can handle that. But if you need an extra 2x4 in your roof for support, New Prairie does that too. And those can be included in your 30% federal tax rebate. The shingles, on the other hand, can't be included in a 30% federal tax rebate. You do want to make sure you have shingles that are in pretty good repair, pretty good condition. If you have shingles that are at the end of their life and they're curling up, first off, there's just a safety issue of being on a roof that has shingles that are cracking and can get damaged by walking on them. But why would you put up this system on the roof when you have to get new shingles right away in a couple years? So it makes more sense in those systems to go ahead and put new shingles on and then put the solar up. But that's the same kind of thing that can happen in this group buy program. There's plenty of people last year that did that. The other question is, what if you had sort of half the life left on your shingles? What if you have 30 or 40-year shingles and you still have half the life left on them? You can make that decision yourself and sort of think about, well, in 25 years, am I going to have to, or in 20 years when I need new shingles, am I going to, maybe I could pay a roofing company or New Prairie to come over, pull the panels off, set them on the ground, and have the roofing company re-roof, and then have another day's worth of work of putting them up on the roof. It's not even a day's worth of work. I mean, all the infrastructure is already there, the electricity is already there. It would just be putting the rails and putting the panels back down. So that's doable as well. So these are just considerations to think about. Yeah, you have a quick question?
What kind of things will damage the panels?
Hail's a common question about panels. Yeah, so panels are rated, and it's pretty cool videos that you can look up online. Panels are rated to maybe 1.5 inch, 2-inch hail, something like that, strikes. And so they have these guns, they have these hail shooting guns that they'll shoot at the panel in the test stations, and it's pretty awesome to see. But basically they're tempered glass, they're similar to your windshield. So in your car, if your car's in a hailstorm, the roof of the car gets dimpled, the metal gets dimpled, and the glass is fine. Similar kind of thing. So your shingles will probably get more damaged by the hailstorm than these panels will in that regard. So insurance is usually not an issue. In our church, our insurance didn't go up when we did our install because they know that these panels last a long time, warranties are there, hail's not really an issue. Basically, if there's a hailstorm that's going to be an issue, you're going to have other issues besides just some broken panels. Yeah.
This is going to be a trick question. Have you ever had trouble with squirrels from local wildlife?
Squirrels and local wildlife is another common question. Yeah, so sometimes there are horror stories out there of a squirrel that builds its nest, and for some reason the squirrel thinks that the wire is tasty and decides to eat a wire. And I guess the explanation to that is, well, they could still do that on your power line. So how often has your power line been nibbled through by a squirrel? And these are shielded. Sometimes a squirrel will stand on the two legs of the transformer and blow up, I'll admit. But these are shielded wires, so there shouldn't really be any wildlife problems. But yeah, that's another common question. Okay, quickly, we'll talk about location. So we talked a little bit about south-facing roofs are best, and east and west could work with a 20% reduction. Nick's got a better example a little later on, but this is a screenshot from a Google project sunroof. Google bought a company that does modeling of how much solar your roof is getting. This is a scene from southern Champaign, and you can see this house here is totally purple, these big trees are blocking it. So Google's taking their XYZ data of roof angles and trees nearby and using an algorithm to shade the roofs and to illustrate bright yellow for good sun and purple for dark shade. So here's a church that we spoke at a couple weeks ago. Here's a great sunny spot, but these east and west roofs are good too. Here's a bank. That would be a great place to put some solar on there. But if you were this home, you might find out from this quick analysis that you weren't so great for solar. But you might look at your neighbor and say, hey, but my neighbor could really use the information. So share that information. And Nick and New Prairie have the professional version of a similar tool that gives them the exact numbers for roofs, and then they also go up on roofs to do a verification. But this Google Project Sunroof is a kind of cool place to start. The caveat is Google does a great job with mapping, but they sometimes don't do such a great job with the local incentives. So one of the two main incentives that we're talking about today really is not included in this analysis. So if you typed your address in, you'd find that your payback doesn't look as good as what we're talking about today. It's because they made a mistake in their algorithm. Ground mounting is another option. So if you have a lot of land, if you're agricultural area, or if you have lots of land on the outside of town maybe, or a large back sunny fenced area, ground mount system would be a good idea for you then. These get mounted into the ground. They're generally static systems that don't have automated rotation to them. They aren't tracking to follow the sun. And the reason why we aren't talking about those is because all those add cost. So adding cost and adding complexity, you might as well just add 10% more panels. If you're adding 10% more cost of gears, why not just add more panels if you have the space? And because this system has nothing that is going to break. So just like on the roof system, these are solid state electronics. They just sit there, they just work, they just produce electrons. It's kind of boring to watch And it's a lot more boring to watch a solar panel than it is to watch a wind turbine. But how many wind turbines have you driven by that are stuck on a nice windy day, and they're stuck, or they're, maybe there's a little oil that has leaked out of them sometimes. And so it's good for a farmer, for somebody who has a tractor that can get up on top of a tall ladder and fix things and change the oil on the wind turbine. Or even a tracking system has hydraulic fluid in the tracking system. So it's good for people that can handle that kind of maintenance and have the time on their hands. But for everybody else, it's nice to just set it and forget it for 25 years. So Nick pointed out to me, though, the system they are looking at that they are using out of actually has a couple of adjustable angles. So you can seasonally you can adjust the panels to be summer mode versus winter mode for a ground mount. So there are some advantages. You might be getting a 20 or 30% increase. Maybe that's a little high, the increase,
yeah,
but
it's generally between like 4 and 10%.
4 and 10% increase,
but,
sure.
But it is a nice, all you have. Yeah, it's a very nice house.
So that's another option as well for more rural systems. Okay, is there enough? Another common question: is there enough sunlight in Illinois to make solar make sense? So here's a map that compares the United States to Germany, is in the inset, and the scale of this shows kilowatt hours per square meter per year. And Germany gets about as much sun as Portland, Oregon. Actually, it gets about as much sun as Alaska throughout the year on average. But Seattle, but Germany has 6.5 times more solar installed in Germany than the entire United States combined. Germany just put a major commitment to say, we really want to do a low carbon solution to our energy portfolio. We are going to make it a social program, and we're going to have major incentives to help installs, and we're going to make an entire industry out of it. And Germany is a world leader in production of solar modules and solar systems and solar inverters. China's catching up and competing very heavily as well. But it's interesting what happens when you put an effort towards something, what you can do and where you can get. The other question is, well, Illinois is not as sunny Arizona, but part of the point is we're plenty sunny. So yes, you might be 20% sunnier in Arizona. Okay, that's fine. The other interesting detail is that in Arizona, they don't get much rain. So in the desert, panels kind of get covered by dust, and dust is actually a consideration in those systems. In Illinois, we have this nice advantage of you get rain, they wash themselves basically several times a month anyways. So that the rain and the snow just help keep our panels clean, which is kind of a nice advantage. Oops. Okay, grid-tied systems. We talked a little bit about how these are, we're staying grid-tied. We're not talking about battery backups. Batteries probably would cost 3 to 5 times more to install a system that was more of a backup system. That's fine if you have some urgent need in your house to have battery backups. But generally, in this case, we're still talking about being for low-cost systems attached to the grid. And so if the grid goes down, if there's a power outage, your power is out as well. The inverters actually need to see line voltage. They actually need to phase match with the grid in order to even operate. So the inverters are electronic computers. They don't even turn on unless they have power. So they're not powered by the solar alone. And this is the least expensive. Now, net metering is available in Illinois up to 2 megawatts, and 2 megawatts is about the size of a Walmart. And incidentally, Walmart is the largest installer of solar in the entire United States. So if there's a business case for it, you can imagine that Walmart's taking advantage of that as well, doing that as well. All right, bulk system. Okay, so this is an illustration that shows the blue bars are electric use for a home throughout the day, and then the yellow is the solar array production peaking in the middle of the day. So we do have more electric use for residential, usually in the evening. But if you overlaid this for the grid use, if you included businesses and libraries and everybody else in our local grid, it would coincide nicely with this solar reducing the carbon, the high carbon inputs to the grid during those times. But another thought is that it's similar to rollover minutes on your cell phone. So at the end of the month, of a sunny month, you might have overproduction on a sunny month in the summer. But then those minutes just get accrued to your account, and then in the winter, when we have less production, you get to take credit for those kilowatt hours that you banked into that system. So Ameren, as if your meter just ran backwards, there might be some times of the year where you've used negative electricity in their accounting. You have banked minutes. or banked kilowatt hours of electricity, and then you take those in the wintertime. They zero out in April, so there's a reason to not build a bigger system than your house uses on average. That's one of the things that New Prairie will ask for utility bills from you, your account number, so that they can compare how much you currently use and make sure they're not sizing a system that's bigger than you would even use. So looking to 70%, maybe 80% of your home use. Our church is 70% of our church use. I work in energy efficiency in buildings, so we definitely want to talk about the least expensive electricity is electricity you don't buy. So we have LED lighting on the top here. So certainly LED lights have come down to $1 or $2 for a 60 watt equivalent light bulb. Just do it. Not even any question anymore. Replace all those 60 watt incandescent light bulbs. Go for it. Energy Star appliances, obviously, when you're looking for a new refrigerator or a new dryer, looking for the Energy Star label. Dryer is a funny one, actually. I don't think there are Energy Star dryers, but maybe a washing machine. There are in Europe, just I don't think we have any here.
It's called a clothesline.
It's called a clothesline. In fact, a clothesline, exactly, a clothesline is probably the single most effective thing you can do to save carbon in your entire life. Is using, as far as cost, zero cost. I mean, there's some time involved in it, but hanging your clothes up to dry even in the basement in the winter. I mean, these are homes that we're trying to humidify in the winter. So clotheslines are a really important thing to keep in mind. Power strips on electronics, so turning your electricity off at night. At my house, I have a $3 light timer on my entertainment center, so at night between, let's say, midnight and 6 a.m., my Wi-Fi gets turned off, my cable modem goes off, my TiVo gets turned off, my TV, any plug loads that are happening there. And a lot of these things don't really add up to a whole lot of electricity. The TiVo, by the way, the DVR, 2 or 3 DVRs is equivalent to a refrigerator, which is kind of amazing to think about. So, so that's something to keep in mind. Now that means I'm not recording Sesame Street at 2 in the morning for my kids, but likewise it also means my kids aren't using the iPad at 4 in the morning, and I have literally had a kid wake me up and say, "Daddy, the iPad's not working," at 4 in the morning, and I said, "Yes, go to bed." So there was added advantages to turning off your wireless and security and safety as well in these, in saving energy. But weatherization, looking at insulation in your attic, insulation in your basement rim joist, air sealing in your basement rim joist, these are all really important areas of your house to look at weatherization. By the way, New Prairie is Building Performance Institute certified, so they are experts at weatherization of homes and expert at older homes in town. So New Prairie can give you a free assessment at the time of giving you, when they're giving you the free solar assessment, they'll also look at a checklist of items for energy efficiency in your home as well. They're already in the attic. It's easy enough just to measure how much insulation you have up there and compare and recommend typical values. And then they look at your electricity use habits. There also are Ameren Act on Energy and programs. So if you're income qualified, which generally means one income. 2 income houses are hard to be income qualified, but there are programs that help pay for a weatherization and some of these energy efficiency through our Ameren bills. We pay into these programs on our Ameren bills, and there are some incentives. And sometimes you'll see at Home Depot, you'll see the light bulb has a little Ameren sticker on it, so some of these programs are helping to buy down the cost of these energy efficient products as well. Okay, here's a little checklist. Is my home well suited for solar? Do I have a south-facing roof? Are there shade issues? Do I have trees nearby? When do I anticipate re-roofing? Is it already a new roof? Is my roof structurally sound? And is my home energy efficient? Now, you don't have to have all of these items checked on your house to be a good option for installing solar. If you had all these options, you'd be in a great scenario. There's a no-brainer. You should definitely install solar if you can. But even if you're missing some of these, Nick has an example in just a minute of a suboptimal house that still works pretty well. Some cost factors that could raise the cost of your system beyond the base price that we've mentioned already. So system size and design. If you're choosing more complicated modules, more higher efficiency modules for a smaller roof, there are options for higher efficiency, but they cost more. If you wanted to have a microinverter for some particular reason and you wanted a different inverter than our program has, there are options, but that could cost more. If you had a really steep sloped roof and the height was, so this example of a garage is probably the simplest installation you could do. So it's a 1-story, not terribly steep slope. Let's say it has good electrical service already. Let's say it already has a good breaker box. The opposite would be you had a 3-story roof with slate tiles and you had a fuse box and your electrical wiring really wasn't up to snuff. Those all add costs and complexity to the system. We mentioned the 30% federal tax credit. We'll talk about the solar renewable energy credit in a second. We talked about net metering. We didn't talk much about accelerated depreciation for businesses, but our example has a line item for that Nick has in a minute. And also at the end, we'll mention a little bit about the 25% USDA grants. So if you're a farmer, you might be applying for these USDA grants as well. It's a grant process, and you need a grant writer, and there's some effort involved in that. But sometimes when you see installations at farms, these paybacks just get cut down and cut down and cut down. Our example was a 7-year payback, and if you start taking 25% off some of these numbers, it really starts reducing the cost. Federal tax credits, 30% includes labor, system installation, all the wiring, interconnections. It does not include new shingles, but it can include the cost for reinforcements if you needed to reinforce your roof. There's no maximum. You have to own your house, but it doesn't have to be your primary residence. So if you had a rental or if you had a cabin on Homer Lake, you could do that. There's some information at desireusa.org for more of these incentives. Desireusa.org is a great resource, but it's almost too good of a resource, and they have so many incentives that you kind of get lost in that. But the ones we're talking about today are the main primary incentives for solar. Let's talk about solar renewable energy credits. So the second incentive that's a big incentive in this program is this auction of your solar renewable energy credits. So basically, it's a way to assign a dollar value to the societal benefits of green energy versus typical energy generation. So you could, in theory, just have a diesel generator sitting outside your house or a natural gas generator sitting outside your house, and you could, in theory, do a sort of similar net metering kind of thing. The utility doesn't really like that very much. But the point is that you'd be feeding into the grid and you'd be a local generator, but that's not really a green option, whereas solar is producing this green option. Now the electrons look the same, whether it's a diesel generator or a solar generator. The grid doesn't know the difference between the electrons. But as a society, we think that there's a difference between the carbon-free electrons. So there's a market and an auction process to sell the first 5 years of your green energy, and it's worth quite a lot of money to sell those first 5 years through this auction program. And the advantage is that New Prairie is aggregating everybody together and being the aggregator for this auction. It's not very easy to go and be your own participant in this program. It's a lot easier to be one of these group buy programs and to take advantage of this auction system. So basically in that example that we had a 7.8 kilowatt system that produces 10 RECs a year. Those are $145 per REC is the estimated rate based on last year, and that's actually a little low, we think. The auction's happening the end of April is when the auction is. We think we'll probably bring in a little bit more than $145 per REC, but basically that's per year, $1,400 per year, and over 5 years it's $7,000. So that's checks that come back to you in the mail based on how much production you make. They come back quarterly. They're not supported through taxes. It is an Illinois program, but the money from it, essentially it's a market-based program where people are buying these green credits on the market. And sometimes you hear them called green tags. The U of I sometimes would maybe buy or sell green tags as well, green credits on the market. At my church, before we put up solar, we're purchasing a little bit extra each month for our electricity to come from 100% renewable wind sources. Again, those are just renewable energy credits. These are worth more because they're in the state of Illinois. We see a higher value to have them local instead of a regional. So for whatever it is, this auction just has this pretty high value on them. We don't know if that value is going to stay up into the future, and that's one of these questions. This last year and then this final April auction of this initial bid seem like the ones that people are most interested in, and we're not sure if they're going to continue. But basically, this is this big incentive by selling your green credits for the first 5 years. Okay, Nick, do you want to talk a little bit about New Prairie? Let's trade
Sure. Do I need the mic?
mics.
Cool. All right. Hi, everybody. So I'm Nick with New Prairie Construction. I started working there 11 years ago. And then in 2009, we're just going to go a little bit of details about how we got into solar. That was kind of after the recession. We had a little downturn. We had this Airstream Safari that was sitting around, and we decided to remodel it with 100% green practices. We used all no VOC type materials on the inside and had a composting toilet and had all these green processes on the inside and had a solar panel with battery backup. And then Scott Willenbrock, a lot of people know him. He's a physics professor around. He wanted to go totally net zero, so he had done a few panels on his garage, and then he wanted to do some on his roof. And so he called us and was like, hey, we're doing these panels, and I don't want to climb on my roof, so will you guys help? And so we went up there and helped him do, I think it was like 35. He did a ton on both the south and east and west faces of his roof. And then the intermediary years, we did a couple installs, got trained by the MREA, went to energy fairs, learned all kinds of stuff, got North American Board of Certified Energy Practitioners certified, so that's really tough and expensive test process that you have to have installs for and you have to apply for. And then in 2016, we worked as a partner with the previous contractor to perform site assessments and work on the installs. So we actually performed over 50% of the site assessments last year and worked on a bunch of the installs as well. And yeah, beyond that, I think, we'll pass around the sign-up sheet for more information about this solar program, but there was also one by the door. Kalin will just send you an email, essentially, that's like, here's what we need, which is your power bill, which you can look up through Ameren's site or many places. So it's a pretty simple process. Okay, so this is a lot of math in my thing, which I'm sure these people will be good at. So we have a little pop quiz that's really easy. And the reason I put these numbers in here is the 800 is the gigatons of carbon that the Paris Agreement agreed that we needed to limit our emissions to stay under 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise. And the 942 is the oil and gas and coal industry analysts' number in how much gigatons of carbon are actually in active wells and mines right now. And so you can see why this is so imperative to go to the solar and renewable energy sources, because we already have enough carbon right now, so we can't keep going forward with that process. So yeah, here we at that nice home again. It's 26 panels of the 300 watt, which is pretty high efficiency. Even a couple of years ago, your typical panel would be like 260. So we're pretty proud of the fact that everything has kind of come together to get these high energy panels. And yeah, that's just pretty simple. Okay, so now we kind of compare with the Central Illinois market rate for this type of solar install is generally around $3.30 a watt. You get a bigger federal tax credit because you're paying more, but your net cost still ends up being around $11,000. Whereas with our program, you still, you get that nice 15% less price, and you end up under that $10,000. So again, yeah, it's like a furnace or something like the air conditioner or something like that. And again, then you have a fairly quick payback of the 7.2 years. And then there's the internal rate of return measurement, which is sort of comparing how you're getting a return on your investment. There's also
we'll give numbers for the modified internal rate of return, which is like if you could have invested it, you know, which is also pretty good. And then this is kind of a suboptimal system. This is the array we actually just finished installing this last week. It's up and running. I did a assessment on this roof. It doesn't look that great. Like you'd think these would be much better. We have these big trees right here. But when I measured it physically on site, it had about a 22% reduction of yield because I put all the panels there. You know, so you can still fit and do fairly decently, even if it doesn't look great in this project sunroof. But I definitely welcome people to look stuff up on here. I think it's a really neat resource. And then here it is. Yeah, there's the array on the roof, the inverter in the basement. It all looks pretty nice and clean. Not something to be afraid of any neighbors, although one guy who was walking by was skeptical, but everybody else was really interested in everything. And a little bit of the process, it's mounted on these rails up there with these flashing feet that tuck in under the shingle and are able to prevent any water from getting to the hole where it's attaching to the rafters. And then, yeah, we set up a scaffold in order to reach the roof because it's just a way safer way to get up there than you see people carrying up ladders. And we had some winds last week. It just does not seem like something you'd want to do. So, oh, and then, yeah, Andy included this. We've got the monitoring site for this site up already. And it was like earlier today, it had made 10 kilowatt hours. And you can see it they have a nice monitoring site. It has like the weather there. And so you can kind of compare, you know, how you did based on the weather year to year with it. And this is showing that sort of suboptimal example and giving a couple different metrics on how it performs. So one way to look at how a solar system performs over time is to give it a levelized cost of energy. So that's like taking all the energy it's going to make over its 25-year life and then dividing it by the cost that you're paying initially. And so through doing that, you get the 7 cents a kilowatt hour rate. Whereas utility cost, if you just were buying straight from Ameren, if you didn't have the community aggregation we have around here, you'd be paying 11 cents per kilowatt hour. It's generally around 10 or something here, but that's always going to go up. It went up in January. It's always going to go up. It doesn't matter what you do. And so that levelizing your cost through buying solar is a great deal there. Yes? You have a question? Oh, okay. You're just, adjusting. I'm moving around too much. And then, again, this was a little bit smaller. We just keyed it up to fit about 66% of their annual utility usage, but the final net present cost after that 5 years of getting those incentives was just $7,000. So I mean, it's still a great deal, and they still will return all of the cash that they paid in about 11 years. It could be quicker depending upon how quickly the energy rates rise and all those kind of things. So yeah, still works good with a little bit of shading or medium amount. And then, yeah, the commercial sort of example, we use 25 kilowatts just because the regulations around here, that's going to be the typical largest array that you can put on. So I just wanted to show how that would look in a place that people recognize. So there's in the press boxes at Memorial Stadium. Yeah, I was just saying maybe something good would happen. And, doing that 25 kilowatt array would be less than 20% of the coach's annual salary. So that'd be I think a good deal. So yeah, again, the idea with businesses is they get the accelerated depreciation. So, over the first 5, I think it's actually 6 years of the life, you can depreciate its value on your taxes. And it's actually really great because it's front-loaded very heavily. The first year is 60%, and the second year is like 25%, and then you have these tiny percentages at the end. So you really can get back the businesses can get back the money quick, and then they still get everything else. So you end up with this cost, net present cost, that's less than the 7.8 system as a business, just because you're offsetting so many of the costs with these generous incentives. And so that ends up paying them back in like to their investment in 4.5 years. And I don't know, that one number is totally wrong, but anyway. And then they levelize their costs. So again, with that lower rate for buying the solar with the generous incentives, they get the 2-cent rate over their time. So it's just incredible deal for their energy going solar with the business. So this is kind of, we decided to put this in. This is what our proposal will kind of look like. We'll come out to your, once we do some initial talking to you, Kalin will send you an email. We'll sort of give you some ballpark numbers and then decide if we want to come out, if you want us to come out to do the actual assessment. And so basically in this first part, I'll have a cover letter that just shows the house that I looked at, the roofs I'm talking about, and then I'll talk about some background on the site, challenges, and tell you what sizes we're planning. If you maybe wanted us to look at a couple different sizes, I'll mention that in there. And I'll also mention how much percentage of your utility usage those sizes are. And then we look at your utility usage in a graph here and kind of compare it to Illinois average is higher than national average. We use a lot of energy here in Illinois for some reason. I don't know why that is. Despite that, and then we also have some efficiency recommendations. One thing that's in there that's not typically spoken about, but I think is a really smart thing, is the furnace offset number. So there's like one selection on your furnace that you can turn this offset number up, and it's basically the number when the furnace will turn on, so it'll let it go a couple degrees below. Just allows your furnace to be a lot more efficient because it can run for longer. Anyway, and that can save a lot of money too. So yeah, energy efficiency and building health. So yeah, I'll just look at your crawl space, your attic insulation. Sometimes I'll be able to tell what's in the walls from looking in the crawl space or looking in but not always, and I don't want to like do anything invasive to look in the walls, so sometimes I'll have a question mark there. But then we'll compare that to the current code is pretty high, and what's typical is generally not there. And so we kind of have a few different levels of where people tend to be with insulation. And most people are fairly low. And then we'll kind of recommend what you could do. And from there, before we do any work, we would have like another assessor come out and do a blower door to assess the air leakiness of your home so that we don't like insulate it, make it tighter, and make a lot of indoor air quality problems, like make it extra moist inside or all those kind of things. So that's kind of how that energy efficiency process would work. Then I'll just give a little schematic of where we're going to mount the panels on, so you have an idea of how it's going to look and know that I have measurements and I know that it's going to fit up there. And oftentimes we'll send this out and people will be like, well, this was somebody's east-facing roof there, and he didn't want it to face that side, or he thought west was better because if we go to time of use rates in the future, afternoon is worth a little more, and so we moved it to west, and I can always change these around. It's not like set in stone, Then we'll just sort of talk about exactly what the equipment that we're proposing is. So we have the size array, what it's offsetting, the type of panels, the type of inverter, type of racking, and some optional items. This home energy monitor, we'll talk about that a little more in the next couple slides. Then you also can get all US-made equipment, which I really recommend. I mean, US-made is really high quality, costs a little more, but it can be worth it. And you can also get really high efficiency modules. So if you have like really tight space, but you want to get to 100%, you can do that. Just costs you a little more. And then we'll talk about the features. You know, the DC optimized systems do a lot of nice things because you can look at what each panel is doing. When a system goes down, they make all the wiring, it brings it to 1 volt per panel. So typically you'll have the wiring will go down to about 10, 20 volts, like a little battery or something like that. So it's a lot safer that way. And then we also have this little the section here that we just have to put in all these things. The utility requires us to put in a disconnect switch so that they can, if they're working on the lines and nobody's home, they can just flip it off, lock it, close, and they'll know that nothing could possibly backfeed. And then we'll connect the monitoring of the array, so we'll have to connect to either your online, your router, or we can also install, if you don't have internet at your home, a cellular card in the inverter that will report. And then we always put in fully flashed mounting feet, and then of course we'll get all the permits and the interconnection with the utility taken care of. And then up here after that, I'll talk about the price of that particular. If we have multiple designs in there, there'll be multiple parts of this section. But you have the price and then what it is per watt. And then I kind of give a little receipt here, essentially, that talks about those incentives and how that kind of gives that net present number that we've been talking about, you know, where all the incentives bring the costs down to. And then, yeah, this is the home energy monitor that you can bundle in. So it's kind of nice. It's just a little add-on to the system, and then you can write that on the tax credit as well. And it also sort of lets you know in real time what your energy usage at your home is. So you can see here you've got the big spikes of, those are like, this is kilowatts on the side. So that's 8 kilowatts. There's a baseboard heater that was running. It was like earlier in the spring. And then we've got our solar going during the sort of main part of the day that's offsetting that part. And then they'll show you, like you'll input your utility information, like what all the different costs are. And then it'll show you what percentage you're using from the solar and what you're saving actually. So it lets you really understand what your bill is, what it will be. Yeah, we have one in our office. Julie can look at that. You can look at hers. You know, it's got an app. And I've got one of my, I really like it for, like when we put it in, we had a dehumidifier in our basement that we didn't realize had this dirty filter. And so it was running all the time at a higher draw than it was supposed to be. And I like took it apart, cleaned the filter, put it back together, and it was using, you know, less than half of what it had been. So you can really save yourself a lot just by realizing you're dumping energy into something you didn't need to. And it'll figure out like what your baseline energy use is and then warn you if you're like gone for a while and your energy use is higher too. So it can really save you some energy. And then yeah, we talk about the farm thing, which is cool.
Yeah, just
yeah, here's the mic.
So just a couple of things to wrap up with. We talked about,
There you go.
So we talked briefly about how the rural program, there is a 25% tax credit, not tax credit, 25% rebate through the USDA. If you know a farmer or have a CSA or a co-op or something like that, you might let them know about this kind of program. Mary Warren at the USDA office is in Champaign, so she's pretty easy to reach out to. It is a grant process, so there's a couple more hoops and a little bit more grant writing to work on these kinds of things, but they can really take advantage of this 25% incentive. Okay, so to wrap up, going solar is a good choice. Going solar Urbana-Champaign 2.0 is a great choice with our group buy. It delivers long-term profitable investment. You can predict your energy prices for the next 25 years, the life of the system. We talked about that low energy price pre-buying your electricity for the life of the system. This is an impactful environmental benefit. It's not just writing a check to getting some sort of credit that's imaginary. You have something solid on your roof that's really there, that people see, your neighbors see, your friends see. You can tell that where your electricity is coming from. It's coming from your roof. So you have energy independence. You know where that source of energy came from. And interest from neighbors, solar is contagious. So the next steps would be to connect with New Prairie for your free site assessment. And we can get your email off of our sheet here. You confirm your address, get 12 months of utility information. Nick can help work with you on that. And then signing a contract before August 31st to be part of the program, and you'll have solar by December 31st. We have some contact information. We have a Facebook page. We have Solar Urbana-Champaign. You can Google pretty easily. MREA has some added benefits. You could become, if you were part of this program, you'd get a free membership with MREA that has free admission to the Energy Fair, access to online educational courses, newsletters, and more. And so we like to think that when there's a huge energy spill, we like to call it a nice day. So sign up for more information from our program. Thank you very much for coming, everybody, and thank you for inviting us. All right, thanks. And if there are any other questions we can answer, we've had a couple so far, but we can answer some more.
Yeah, when we're looking at sizing the array, you've got a fixed array. What is the efficiency of the panel in relationship to the normal to the surface, in relationship to the sun's right ascension and declination?
As far as throughout the day, it's going to change. You're going to get more production throughout the day.
What kind of efficiency, or how would we size the panel?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
to get the continuous optimal, load that you need.
Right. So, we just will look at your utility bills, and then we'll essentially, we can model throughout the year based on weather data and everything, what at that tilt, that panel will produce. And so we'll just model that all out and size it to be less than what your utility usage is, essentially.
And there's some good online calculators for that as well. So PV Watts is run by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So PV Watts is a good online calculator for that. I was using that at our church for our installations to double check the solar installers' estimates on our installation.
Obviously, the best thing is a variable array where we're a tracking array to collect that.
Yeah.
So a tracking array might get 20% more production, but it might cost 20 or 30% more to put in.
Yeah, I mean, in this program, we're working with this company for ground mounts, U.S. Solar Mounts. They're from Wisconsin, and they do have a tracking upgrade that's really nice. I think it's just a single degree tilt tracking, so it'll track the tilt of the sun during the day, and that just uses one actuator for the entire array, and so that is something that's available, and it's not a huge cost. It's probably, to do that on an average size, probably like 10% this edition. So it's not crazy.
Mm-hmm. For a ground mount system.
For a ground mount, yeah. Mm-hmm. We typically won't make the angle adjustable on the roof, because who's gonna do that? Yeah.
And keeping things simple is part of the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So other questions? Yep.
Yeah. I didn't see anything about battery banks.
So, right, batteries would cost maybe 3 to 5 times more. And so if you lived on top of a mountain and you didn't have electricity with a grid, batteries would be a possible option. Or if for some reason you were a business and you were charged for your demand usage as well, for your kilowatt, your instantaneous demand, it might be nice to have batteries to help reduce your instantaneous demand for a business. But residences don't get charged a demand charge, so that's not an there's not an advantage in that regard financially.
Tesla recently come out with the battery pack.
Yeah, so Tesla has some batteries that they use. They use the round lithium-ion batteries all lined up, just like they have on the base of their car. There's the inverter companies pretty much all have options for batteries coming forward as well. The tricky thing is a lot of the batteries only have like an 8-year warranty, and If it's anything similar to the battery on my cell phone, I've got to imagine at 8 years it's really not going to work very well anymore. So that's one of those drawbacks. Traditional installations, there's some in town even that have lead acid batteries. You have to add water to them. There's maintenance involved, and those will maybe only last 3 to 5 years. They're cheaper, so they might make more sense sometimes depending on what the finances are. So there are people that do that. It's just a question of, if we lived in Hawaii, or there's an island in America, Samoa, that put in large grid scale battery, like batteries that are the size of container trucks that they just ship there and they install. And so grids are looking at doing that. Utility scale batteries are looking at doing that for areas that otherwise would have diesel generators at night, getting rid of those dirty and expensive diesel generators. So there are grid installations that are looking at doing batteries. We have a lot of nuclear in Illinois, and nuclear doesn't ever turn off. It's just a base load because they want to just keep running at the same level. So in some ways in Illinois, that's kind of like almost like our battery. The other things can turn off and on, and the nuclear just stays on all the time. So we don't have a whole lot of need for nighttime electricity in Illinois. Our nighttime electricity is actually really clean already. It's low carbon already because it's mostly nuclear. So there's interesting, kind of scenarios of that.
There's a lot of battery products coming on the market now. I mean, it's certainly something that is doable if you're super interested. You're not going to ever back up your whole home, though, because, again, that's where you come up against these huge price limitations. But you might be able to back up, like, a small portion, like your refrigerator and a few circuits.
Yeah, and you might have a sub-panel.
Too much cost.
Yeah, you'd have the electrician would wire in a sub-panel, and just your refrigerator would get wired in, your furnace would get wired on that. So your emergency items.
Or if you have like a server, if you're a web-based business, you have a server. A lot
Sure.
of people will do that for that. And we have one of the battery partners that we've been working with is this Sonnen company out of Germany. So Germany is having to do that because they have so much solar. They are having to put in batteries, so they've been doing this a lot. And so this Sonnen company uses these lithium iron phosphate chemical, which is a lot more stable. They don't do those things that all the Samsung phones do where they blow up. Like, you could stab them as much as you want. It would do.
Yeah. They're heavier and bigger, but if you're in your house, why do you care about heavier and bigger? It's no big deal.
And they last a long time. They're guaranteed for 10 years, for 10,000 cycles. So that's something that can be done, but they're fairly pricey.
Right. But certainly something. I mean, that's an area of research.
Yeah.
That's an area that people are looking into.
I'm
And
just wondering, when would it pay itself back as far as how much, because at nighttime, right, you're not going to get, like you showed
yeah,
the
the
graph.
payback analysis. I did an example in a graduate class last year, and it took my payback analysis from 11 years to 35 years
To justify a battery.
in Illinois.
Oh, wow.
Because of the net metering, you're using the grid as your battery, so you generate that, and then you take those credits
Yeah.
back when you turn stuff on
Right.
at night.
Right now we have a free battery, and it's called
Yeah.
our grid and our neighbors.
Yeah.
And now that free battery, once we get above the Illinois net metering rules are at 2%. 2% of customers in Illinois for Ameren can have net metering, and once we get above 2% of the state with net metering, then Ameren can sort of decide not to do that. But that's the state law. We're nowhere near that. And for example, places where this is becoming an issue, like let's say Germany or Arizona or Hawaii, they're getting up into the 20 and 30% of their customers having solar on their systems. And that's when you start getting into questions of do we need that much solar at noon? Do we need that much electricity at noon? Once you get 20 or 30%, it starts adding some instability to the grid. And I would love to have Illinois have these problems. I would love to be at 20 to 30%. Right now we're well below 2%,
Yeah.
so we have a long ways to go. But those are areas, in island nations, Germany, some of these places are really contending with these next questions.
And those states have those problems because, their utility rate is 20, 30, 40 cents per kilowatt hour.
So a lot of people have done this, yeah.
4 times what we're paying. And so in Hawaii, I've seen the math. I mean, it'll pay back in the same number of years to take out your meter, put in batteries, go completely off grid. In 7 years, you'll be paid back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in Hawaii, you could do that.
Right.
Because it's so expensive.
And that's where companies, so Tesla is marketing to those markets.
Yeah, Tesla loves Hawaii.
Yeah.
Of course.
Right.
They don't like to share either, yeah. But the one thing is this base inverter, Solar Edge, they're one of the partners that have worked with Tesla. And so they already have a little bit of the software in these inverters that you'd need a couple extra units to work with a Powerwall, but there's a little bit of the software in these inverters to work with
So in the future,
Powerwalls in the future.
so like on that graph that Nick showed of our power amount increasing, if that graph, if it goes like this and our
Yeah.
power goes to those rates, then we could upgrade these systems.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. One more question, maybe.
Question about going to the financial aspect of things. I don't feel like I have a really good grasp on what the SRECs, is that what they
Yep.
are, and what's the risk? I mean, that's over a period of time, so
Yep.
what's the risk that would not be there?
Yeah. So the SRECs, there's a risk that they won't. There's a risk that auction won't take place next year. There's one question there, but anyone that is in this time period of the program, in this group buy, in this next 6 months, you are auctioning your credits for 5 years, and that's guaranteed.
Yeah.
That's what the auction is.
You will sign a contract that's with the SREC aggregator and the Illinois Power Agency that's for 5 years to sell these RECs. And then we'll set up all that paperwork. The aggregator will be reading your inverters, monitoring, and then they will just be sending you checks. We actually, at one of the last power hours.
Like, if you have any extra power?
No, it's literally every single electron that the solar array makes, you get paid for the SREC. So it's not if you export it to the grid, it has nothing to do with any of that.
So,
You're using power.
Right.
So you're
even though
using
you're
it.
using it.
Another way to think about it would be that you're selling your green credits, and let's say Ameren is purchasing those. Ameren has a commitment to get 20% renewable by 2020. So let's say Ameren purchases your first 5 years of renewable energy credits, which is pretty likely. It's probably Ameren. That means Ameren's not going to go and put in their own solar farm of an equivalent size somewhere. So they're purchasing someone else's solar.
Showing that they're doing.
Right.
Yes.
So in some ways, you aren't planting those 177 trees for those first 5 years. I mean, so there are 5 years when your system is offsetting someone else putting in a solar system somewhere else. So, overall, the state still gets more solar. Overall, we all benefit, and we get to our goals, and we ramp up. And this is also a way for solar installers to ramp up their ability to install locally, to get more of a base of people installing, get it more common, get the costs down. And then even if these programs, even if these incentives go away in the future, hopefully the costs have been reduced, even further in the future, and then they can stand on their own in that regard. Julie, do you have a thought?
The taxability of the SRECs is probably something that you want to put out there.
SRECs are taxed, they're taxed as income. That's another item. So that, I think Nick had that in one of his slides.
There's
That
a difference between Andy's figures, which was 7,000, whatever.
Yep.
And Nick's, which was 6,000, whatever, and the difference was Nick took the taxes out and Andy didn't.
True. I had some simple math, and Nick has a calculator essentially that comes out of your system that does a lot of the complex calculations in it as well.
So that was the difference there, but
Yep.
it is taxable income.
Yep.
Okay.
And so, SRECs are a confusing thing to think about, but if you want to just think about it as it's just a commodity, and you're just allowing someone to, buy your solar instead of putting up their own solar somewhere else for those first 5 years. But the idea is then the system's going to last for 25 years, so you've traded off your first 5 years of green production for this large sum of money to help you put that system in. I know people that, by the way, that don't sell their SRECs. They are independently wealthy, and they didn't need the financial incentive to put the solar on, and they said, no, I want to keep my SRECs. I want to keep that green credit, and that's a possibility as well. Okay, I think we'll probably wrap up there. Thank you guys very much for staying with us for the full hour and a half, and we can answer questions individually at the end as well. So thank you.
Thank you.